What's up, everybody? This is Andrew Erickson here from the Full Press Coverage Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm back again doing my 32 teams in 32 days before the countdown of the NFL season. I may be off by a couple days. I may have done my math incorrectly, so we may be doubling up on a couple days and a couple teams here. But today we're going to be talking about the Atlanta Falcons. Before I get into that, we got to do have a little bit of news. Antonio Callaway of the Cleveland Browns was cited for marijuana in his vehicle. When kind of approached to the topic, Callaway reported, and this is from, let's see, what source is this from? This is coming from Cleveland Plain Dealer. So I don't know if that's, someone may have distributed him the marijuana. Antonio Callaway said that marijuana found in a Sunday morning search of his car was not his. Per league source, Callaway's story is apparently that he had recently had his car shipped from Florida to Ohio and that he hadn't used it in a while, but others had. Just another story as we get Hard Knocks going on tonight. Actually, I'm recording this on Tuesday. I don't have HBO though, so I don't know what's going to happen to Hard Knocks, but I can only imagine it's going to be tons of fun with those Cleveland Browns. But today we're going to be talking about not those Cleveland Browns, but the Atlanta Falcons, the Dirty Birds, team that disappointed a little bit last year, but we're going to get right into it here. So we've got, the two big guys here on the screen. You can see Matt Rya, Julio Jones. But first, before I talk about those guys, I want to talk about Steve Sarkisian. Second year in the offense with the Falcons, with Matt Rya, with Julio Jones. Being comfortable is going to be a huge thing as we go into 2018. The thing about the Falcons' offense last year was, from an efficiency standpoint, they weren't converting in the red zone because they were able to move the ball pretty effectively. In 2017, they had the second highest drive percentage, drive success, and yards per drive. So they were getting down the field. They just weren't converting in the red zone. We all know Julio Jones had a career low in red zone, targets, red zone efficiency, whatever. That's going to improve. You look at his numbers compared to a guy like Jarvis Landry. Do you think Jarvis Landry's going to have more touchdowns than Julio Jones is next year? Not a chance. It's typical, regression. We all predicted he was going to have, or at least most people predicted, regression for Matt Rya back to the norm after 2016's explosion. But he kind of regressed a little too far. So I expect his production to pick back up. If he goes to his average of around 4.6 touchdowns or 4.6 touchdown rate per season, he's going to be higher than he was last year, where he was at abysmal. I bet it was around 3.2. It was very low. It was almost half of what he had. It was less than half, I think, from what he had in 2016, where it was up in the 7 point something rate. So you have the Falcons here, who I do expect them to bounce back. I think the offense as a whole is going to improve in Steve Sarkisian's offense. It's all about being comfortable, and he's seen all these guys before. He knows their traits. And the really only addition they've brought in is a guy by the name of Calvin Ridley from Alabama, who just happens to be, formerly coached by Steve Sarkisian. So another guy that he's very familiar with. So I do like the offense to improve. And the offense actually did improve, especially in terms of Julio, during the season. So the Falcons started out 3-3 and then ended up going on a run later in the season where they faced, a lot of the top defenses in the league. After that Patriots game was kind of a turning point for them, and this is something that I've kind of read in some materials I've read this offseason, basically looking at Julio Jones. Basically, what I've been reading is the 2018 football preview. I couldn't remember the name, Warren Sharp. So essentially what Warren Sharp talks about for the Falcons specifically is with Julio Jones, and basically they weren't targeting him enough on first down. They weren't targeting him enough on first down. They weren't targeting him deep enough on first down. So not sure if Steve Sarkisian got a hold of Warren Sharp, but they were able to then convert and kind of change that up, and Julio was then targeted more on first down. He was targeted down the field more, and they had more success. That's also when Julio had his explosion game during that time period. So expect Julio to be fed more on first down, more down the field. So I do really think that the Falcons will improve over years, over year two with Steve Sarkisian at the helm. So the biggest thing then kind of going back from that, so positive regression, of course. Calvin Ridley as a wide receiver. So in terms of draft position, Matt Rya is a perfect guy to draft late in drafts. He's a guy that you want to have on your roster because he's going super late, and he's going to be better than last year. I can almost guarantee he'll be better than last year because he can't physically be as bad as he was last year in terms of his touchdowns. I do expect him to pick it up. He's not going to be 2016 Matt Ryan, but he will be closer to what his career average is, which is better than what we saw in 2017. Julio Jones is a receiver that's going in the second round that you can get him. And I expect him to, if he stays healthy, that he's going to produce at a wide receiver top 5, top 3 level. You not often not can you get a number 1 player at their position in the second round of a fantasy draft. That's tough to get, especially at the receiver position. So I love Julio's value as a second round pick. Getting him, pairing him with another receiver if you're going 0 RB. But I think Julio's touchdowns are definitely going to go up this year, and obviously you have the production aside, from his receiving ability, which is something, and he can always explode. That being said, the other guys to talk about, Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu. I do think that, Mohamed Sanu will always still be involved in 3 receiver sets, a guy who runs out of the slot. Calvin Ridley's another guy, so he can run a lot of different routes, a lot of different places, but I do think that he will kind of overtake Calvin Ridley, or I think he will take over what Mohamed Sanu has as that number 2 target from the receiving standpoint. So essentially what I'm looking at with Calvin Ridley is basically, I wrote, something a piece on him a little bit earlier this year, and about basically, I could see him finishing anywhere in the top 30. So a top 3 receiver, we saw that from Sanu the last 2 seasons, finishing in the top 36, while being, second fiddle to Julio Jones. So I do think that Calvin really does have a shot of finishing in the top 30. Basically, kind of summarizing, so Sanu in 6 seasons has never finished as a top 24 receiver in center fantasy scoring. Taylor Gabriel's not there anymore, so it's another guy. I think that, obviously there are targets up for grabs in that case. Austin Hooper's there as well, but he hasn't really been a dynamic tight end. Tight ends you can break out a little bit earlier, so he may have some sleeper value. He's not a guy I'm particularly targeting just because there are so many other pieces on that offense, and we've never really seen, not so much in the, Kyle Shanahan offense. Steve Sarkisian offense, we haven't seen a tight end feature as much. Obviously, it's only his second year, so. But Matt Ryan, really, for the most part, besides being a Tony Gonzalez, hasn't really focused. But, you have Julio Jones. It's probably going to be the guy you're going to throw to. But anyway, so averaging, the number 2 receiver target totals for the Falcons since Julio Jones has joined the team, approximately 94 targets. So based on, the catch rate of Calvin Ridley at 63.6% and his yards per reception at 13.5. My stat projection for Ridley in 2018 would be rounds out to around 60 receptions for 810 yards and 5 touchdowns. So for those keeping track at home, that accounts to 111 standard fantasy points, which would put him at wide receiver 30 in 2017. And something that can change there as well is, you have touchdowns, and that's something that is very volatile, especially with the case of Julio Jones, a guy who's never been a really consistent touchdown guy. Julio Jones hasn't scored double-digit touchdowns since 2012 and has scored less than 8 touchdowns in the past 4 or 5 seasons. So I really think that Calvin really does have an opportunity to, be a main staple in this offense. Not, I don't think he's necessarily going to be, a wide receiver 2, but I think as a depth piece, I think that he can be very productive in this offense. I think he offers a little bit more than Mohamed Sanu does from a dynamic standpoint. So I like Calvin Ridley. I would compare him to a Reggie Wayne type of, player. Really good route runner, not going to beat you with athleticism necessarily, not beat you with strength, but, with crisp route running and just getting open. And Matt Ryan's going to throw it to the open guys. So that's why I like Calvin Ridley. And if Julio is to sustain an injury, it's just another way, that Calvin Ridley can, kind of fill in, gain targets going off on that direction. So, talked about the receivers, talked about Matt Ryan and the Falcons offense, touched on Hooper. Last piece I want to touch on here is the running back position. So Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman. So Devonta Freeman is a guy that, a lot of people are down on for the most part. It makes kind of sense. So Freeman basically has decreased in production the last 3 years in a row. So 2015 he was RB1, 2016 he was RB6, and 2017 he was RB13. But you have to keep in mind that, okay, he our 2015 was a really low year for running backs, so basically all running backs sucked, and he was just had a good year, and he just ended up being number one. So those numbers were kind of inflated from being the running back one. Running back six, obviously, was when the Falcons had their crazy season, and then last year he actually missed 2 games. So essentially, you still got a running back one, in a down year for the Falcons, and he missed 2 games. Like I said, the Falcons' offense is going to be better. They're going to score more touchdowns, and you're going to see some positive regression for this Falcons offense, especially with Devonta Freeman, who is healthy now. Injuries are always a concern, at the running back position, but I still would not necessarily shy away from him, especially because you can get him in that second round, again, kind of in that Christian McCaffrey area. McCaffrey is kind of that hotness guy. You want to be, he's got a high upside, but he has, C.J. Anderson there. Greg Olson's coming back, and this isn't about the Panthers, but just kind of comparing guys. Like, I could definitely, make the argument for taking Devonta Freeman over Christian McCaffrey. I can see, depending on how your team is set up. But I think Devonta Freeman is still a guy that you don't want to be sleeping on. He's still pretty young running back. I believe he's only 26 years old. So I do like him, especially with the Falcons. Necessarily they may be going away from Tevin Coleman a little bit. He may not be there next year. Who knows? Maybe they trade Tevin Coleman halfway through the season. Anything could happen. With that being said, Tevin Coleman is a guy that, if you are waiting on running back, is a good value. He's going, 5th, 6th round, and the last 2 seasons he's finished as RB17 and RB22. So Tevin Coleman is probably locked in as, I would say, at worst, a top 30 running back, and, he has that, really high potential if Devonta Freeman is to go down, that Tevin Coleman will kind of slide into that role. He's already had a role as a pass catcher. He gets involved in the offense. This is another weapon. So Tevin Coleman's another guy. If you're waiting on running back, is a guy I would like to target as well. So overall, the Falcons are a team that, it's funny. Everyone's going to try to avoid the teams that just sucked the year before, but that's really actually who you want to target. You want to target the teams that everyone's lower on, and that's how you kind of, look last year. DeAndre Hopkins, everyone was low on him. Todd Gurley, everybody was low on him, and then what happened? You saw it all kind of click together. So target the Falcons. Make sure you have a piece of the Falcons offense on your roster, regardless of whether it's running back, quarterback. I think Matt Ryan's probably the easiest one to acquire, and then trying to get maybe Calvin Ridley later in the drafts. But obviously the top of your drafts, Julio. I think really you get all these guys really good value. I don't really dislike any of them particularly. I'm not avoiding any Falcons player. I'm actually targeting these Falcons players, as I would recommend that you do as well. And just looking at the rest of their depth chart here, Justin Hardy, Marvin Hall, Reggie Davis, nobody. And then they drafted Ito Smith. So Ito Smith will probably take over for Tevin Coleman if Tevin Coleman leaves in free agency, which is probably going to happen. But really not. I mean, for the most part, that's the other thing too. Their offense has essentially stayed the same. They do have a new guard. That's probably going to start Brandon Fusco, who they got from San Francisco. But besides that, their offense is very consistent from last year. That's the other thing we want. People fall in love with the new hotness and the new pieces. But it's really like, hey, take what worked, take something last year, take something that's going to grow, that's, in year 2, that's going to, become better. So I'm like convincing myself more about the Falcons right now and how excited I think that they can be going into 2018. And, they play in a division that's, it's a tough division, but, a lot of good quarterbacks, a lot of points are going to be flying. They play in a dome. So I like the Falcons again. So I think they're a team that you want to target for sure for your fantasy players. That is kind of what I have for you guys today. We're down 2 teams. We did the Cardinals, and now we've done the Falcons, and I'm going to try to keep this going, and we'll see if I can get to the end. It keeps me busy before football season starts, but I'm enjoying doing these, and, please leave your comments and reviews. I'm just trying to get better, doing these videos and these podcasts, so please let me know your feedback, and make sure you draft these guys. Where's my hand? There it is. Draft these guys here. There we go. Shout out to Scott Fish for my Scott Fish Bowl t-shirt we got going on here. It's nice and tight, It's just like the ladies like it, so we're good in that aspect. But I will talk to you guys tomorrow. See you.